The 1990s were chock-a-block with some of the world's most high-profile crimes that are still discussed even today. In 1996, there was the murder of Tupac Shakur and JonBenet Ramsey. A year later, we saw the death of fashion icon Gianni Versace. And in 1998, Saturday Night Live favorite Phil Hartman was shot to death by his own wife. Perhaps the most notable crime of the year 1999 was the Columbine High School massacre, which overshadowed many of the other missing reports and murder cases of the year. In today's episode, we'll be exploring two chilling, unsolved cases from 1999. Heather Johnson. Heather Jean Johnson was born on August 18, 1980. Little is known about her case, and even less is documented about her early life. By the age of 18, she was an experienced exotic dancer working at several strip clubs in Maryland, including a few located on the block in Baltimore, a stretch of a street containing several sex shops, strip clubs, and other adult entertainment establishments. While working in one club, she met a man named Bobby Hayslip, who was possibly her employer at the time. Not much is known about Bobby, but according to numerous articles, the pair entered into a relationship shortly after they met. Heather was known to enjoy having a lot of money. She was a hard worker and preferred to pick up employment in large cities as it allowed her to earn more. She stored her cash in safety deposit boxes, some of which she kept in her home in Bowie, Maryland. In the summer of 1999, the 18-year-old began to suspect that her boyfriend Bobby had stolen a safe full of money from her, and this, in turn, motivated her to hire several men to attack him. However, the men who arrived on the scene didn't just attack Bobby, they attempted to murder him. On June 24th, Heather lured her boyfriend to her apartment, where two men lay in wait. When Bobby entered the home, he was stabbed with a pair of scissors. As he collapsed to the ground, he was wrapped in chains and placed in a plastic bag. It was possible he was going to be thrown from a bridge, but as details in the case are murky at best, it is unclear what exactly occurred following this attack. What we know for certain is that Bobby survived, and Heather was arrested and charged with attempted murder in September of 1999. Shortly after this, the 18-year-old posted a $300,000 bail and subsequently vanished. Her mother reported her missing in October of 1999. However, there are some discrepancies surrounding the timeline of Heather's disappearance. An archived FBI post shows that she was charged with attempted murder on September 8th, but most sources discussing her disappearance state that she went missing on August 4th. It is unclear why there is such a large gap in these dates, but as previously mentioned, the particulars of this case are rather confused and uncertain. In January of 2000, a federal arrest warrant was issued after Heather was charged with unlawful flight to avoid prosecution. Since then, there has been at least one alleged sighting of her in Atlantic City, New Jersey, which has led to some speculation that the 18-year-old left of her own accord and decided to start over. America's Most Wanted later profiled her case and stated that she was also supposedly spotted in Miami, Florida, and California. The archived FBI profile of Heather's case also notes that she may be living in North Carolina, but it is unknown where this information came from. One Web Sleuths user suggested that Heather may be an unidentified Jane Doe who was found in Sarasota County, Florida, on February 6, 2007. Jane Doe is believed to have perished in 2006, and her remains were partially skeletonized at the time of her discovery. However, her estimated age is between 30 and 45 years old, while Heather would have been just 26 in 2006. Furthermore, Jane Doe is believed to have been between 1 and 5 inches taller than Heather. She was also heavier in weight, but an individual's weight is prone to fluctuate throughout their life, especially as they grow older, so this is perhaps less of an issue as the other factors mentioned. One interesting thing to note, however, is that Jane Doe had Mentor Smooth Round Moderate 1600 Celine breast implants manufactured in 1998. Heather was known to have breast implants and would likely have gotten them around this time, as she would have turned 18 that year. However, there is no serial number on the implants, as this was less common at the time. There is very little to truly connect Jane Doe with Heather Johnson, and it's also worth pointing out that Heather had a myriad of fake identities, indicating that she could have gotten her breast implants earlier than we estimate. Expanding on that further, Heather was known to use a total of 6 different birth dates and 12 aliases, for most of which she kept her first name, or used the first name Audrey. According to her Doe Network page, she is also known to wear wigs and is adept at changing her looks. This has led many armchair detectives to theorize that she truly did start a new life somewhere else. But others have asked why and how, at such a young age, she was so experienced in such things. It has also been pointed out that she appears to be older than 18 in her photographs, and many have noted their concern that she was an experienced exotic dancer at the time of her disappearance, suggesting that perhaps she was using her fake birth dates, one of which made her 5 years older than she was, to help her gain employment at a young age. She would not be someone who was described as experienced if she only started dancing at the age of 18, and this has led to the belief that she was exploited and surrounded by unsavory characters. One Reddit user suggested that if Heather's boyfriend was her employer, perhaps he discovered that she had been underage while dancing, and this was possibly a motive for him to make her disappear. Or maybe another employer caught wind of this and had the same reaction. Adding to the idea that she associated with dangerous people was the fact that she was able to hire people to attack her boyfriend for her. This makes it seem not impossible that she may have then found people to help her escape to a new life. One interesting tidbit of information that arose while researching this case was the notion that a bail bondsman named Dean Pantases was involved. He had 2 children with his wife Clara, when he reportedly hired a sex worker named Jermel Chambers to kill her for him. He paid her $11,000. Jermel claimed a man named Steve hired her to murder his boss's wife, but picked Dean's image out of a lineup. Pantases had been allegedly using Chambers and another sex worker to help him track down Heather Johnson. However, the connection between the two has virtually no evidence to back it up, and the idea seems to have stemmed from a podcast. Heather Johnson is still missing. Her mother has declared her legally dead in the years since her disappearance, and believes her daughter met with foul play. There are less than a handful of theories in the 18-year-old's case. Most online sleuths believe she left of her own accord and met with foul play later in life, but some have also speculated, since it appeared she lived a rather high-risk lifestyle, that she was murdered after leaving prison, possibly for her money. Heather Johnson was just 18 when she vanished from Glen Burnie, Anne Arundel County, Maryland. The official date of her disappearance is listed as August 4th, 1999. Heather is a white woman with brown shoulder-length hair and hazel or green eyes. She is around 5'2" to 5'4" and weighed between 105 to 130 pounds when she was last seen. She has had several cosmetic surgeries on her breasts and buttocks, including breast implants. Unfortunately, only her fingerprints are on file, and it is unknown what clothing and accessories she was wearing at the time of her disappearance. If Heather is still alive, she will be 42 years old. If you have any information about her case, you can contact the Anne Arundel County Police at 410-222-3588. Raonaid Murray. Born on January 6th of 1982 to parents Jim and Deirdre, Raonaid Murray grew up in Glenageary in the south of Dublin with her 2 siblings, an older brother Daniel and an older sister Sarah. A clever and sociable girl, Raonaid enjoyed poetry and reading. Her favourite play was Under Milk Wood by Dylan Thomas, and she had big dreams of becoming a writer in adulthood. In her teens, she attended St. Joseph of Cluny Secondary School, where she achieved high marks on her junior certificate. She went on to complete her leaving certificate in June of 1999, before finishing school and starting a part-time job at Sally West, a boutique located in the Dun Learley shopping centre. Although she enjoyed her job, Raonaid planned to resit her leaving certificate exam so she could gain a higher score. she wanted to attend the arts faculty in University College, Dublin. While Raonaid's group of friends were mostly considered goths, she was known to stand out amongst them with her light blonde hair, more colourful clothing, and her blue nose stud. At the time of her death in 1999, she was popular and well-liked, with no known enemies, and the crime sent shockwaves through the local community. On the evening of September 3rd, Raonaid finished up her shift at Sally West at around 9:40 p.m. Following this, she headed over to Scott's Pub on George Street, where her friends were enjoying drinks and waiting for her arrival. Between 11:25 and 11:40 p.m., the 17-year-old left the pub to return home temporarily. She wanted to get changed before the group headed to Paparazzi's Disco on the top floor of the Dun Laoghaire shopping centre. While Raonaid's home was just 15 minutes away from her location, she didn't arrive back. Between 11:50 p.m. and 12:20 a.m., she was placed by a reliable witness on the Glenageary Road Upper, where she was seen fighting with a man. Nearby witnesses, reportedly a group of teenagers, heard a female voice saying, "Leave me alone," and "Go away," all of which was followed by a scream. Afterwards, it quietened down, so nobody went to investigate the situation. Raonaid's sister, Sarah, was on her way home from her own evening out, around 12:20 a.m., when she and her friends came across a girl's body. A split second later, they realized it was Raonaid. She was just 50 yards from her home. The 17-year-old had not been robbed or sexually assaulted, but had been stabbed around 30 times. Most of the wounds were insignificant and superficial, barely piercing her clothing, but 4 in particular made a massive impact. They'd penetrated her side, chest, armpit, and shoulder, and one of these had hit an artery, resulting in massive blood loss. It is believed Raonaid staggered about 200 feet before she collapsed, and although the murder weapon has never been found, it has been described as a double-edged 6-inch blade that was likely a butcher's knife, or one used by caterers. There were defensive wounds on the 17-year-old's left arm, and police theorized that the perpetrator would have fled the scene covered in blood. The horrific and seemingly random crime shocked those who knew her. Who would want Raonaid dead? More than 100 Gardaí worked on Raonaid's case at its peak, and the initial investigation was led by Chief Superintendent Martin Donnellan, the head of the National Bureau of Crime Investigation. One hiccup in the case, however, was reportedly the local Chief Superintendent, Pat Culhane, who is now deceased, and who wanted to beat Donnellan to an arrest. This would later come to the attention of cold case investigators, who concluded that the issues may have hampered parts of the investigation, but it likely didn't have a severely damaging effect. Within the first decade of the investigation, more than 8,000 people were interviewed, and almost 3,000 statements were taken. There were also 12 arrests over the course of the inquiry, and detectives identified around 22 potential persons of interest. In 2000, just 1 year after the crime had occurred, investigators made a fresh appeal for information from the public. They also appealed for help to the listeners of Morning Ireland, the most listened to radio program in the Republic of Ireland. Every year, Raonaid's family put out an appeal for information, and have offered a reward of €190,000 for information that will lead to a conviction in their daughter's case. On the 10th anniversary of Raonaid's murder, authorities issued a description of a man and woman with whom they wished to speak. In more recent years, when authorities ask for information, they hope that witnesses who may have been young at the time are now mature enough to come forward with what they know. Around 2009, investigators had a forensic profile of the perpetrator created. It suggested that the culprit was a young man in his mid to late 20s, living alone or with his mother, and that he was single. He would also be a loner with a possible drug problem and may have spent some time in psychiatric care. He would likely have a history of antisocial behavior, and it was unlikely that he had had any intimate relationships. It was probable that he would strike again. The year before this, in 2008, a unit of experienced Gardaí, called the Garda Serious Crime Review Team, working under Superintendent Christy Mangan, began to review the case. It was here they discovered the rivalry between Pat Culhane and Martin Donnellan, and they identified a number of other mistakes and oversights that had occurred during the original investigation. Reportedly, some potential witnesses who came forward with information at the time were not correctly followed up with, and the rivalry between the two chief superintendents led to a lack of clear communication between Garda units. Furthermore, there were also irregularities in a statement by a particular witness, who alleged that their statement was forged, as investigators had lost the original. During the course of this cold case investigation, however, the team were able to recommend renewed searches for the murder weapon, and came up with several interesting new angles in the case. They suggested that the crime was not the work of a random killer, but that Raonaid knew the perpetrator. They came to this conclusion after noting there had been no similar attacks in the years before or after the teenager's murder in the Dublin region. They suggested that she was killed after a personal disagreement caused the teenager to break off communication, or that the attacker was someone who held a personal grudge of another nature. They also theorized that the perpetrator was possibly a woman. Some speculated that this was because so many of the knife stabs had been so weak. Notably, female DNA was found beneath Raonaid's fingertips, but this could have just been something she picked up while interacting with customers at work. Over 50 women have been ruled out as a match to this DNA. Using this information, investigators were able to pin down a woman who they thought could be involved in Raonaid's case. The woman, who has never been named by law enforcement, has family ties to the IRA and was part of the teenager's friend group. She was reportedly known for her jealous streak and aggressive behavior, and friends felt she could be responsible because Raonaid was more intelligent and more popular than her. Interestingly, it is believed that she was in a relationship at the time of the murder, and rumors suggested that her boyfriend had some sort of obsession with Raonaid. This may have led to a fracturing of the relationship between the woman and Raonaid, and the couple may have harbored resentment for the teenager. Although both parties were questioned in relation to the case, they both claimed they were innocent, and the woman's DNA did not match that which was found beneath Raonaid's fingernails, although the boyfriend's appearance did somewhat line up with the description given of the man who was seen with the 17-year-old on the night of her death. The woman apparently now lives abroad. She left Ireland about 1 year after the crime. Interestingly, she was reportedly the first to tell their shared friend group that Raonaid was dead. It is unclear if she told them before or after this information had been made public. However, this woman was not the only possible person of interest in the case. In fact, many more were identified by detectives over the years. The earliest suspect in the case was a man described as being in his mid-20s, with sandy-coloured hair, in a similar style to Oasis frontman Liam Gallagher. He stood at around 5'10" and wore light-coloured combat trousers and a beige top. This is the man who was seen arguing with Raonaid on the night of the crime. It has been noted that this man also bears a resemblance to one who was seen dancing with her at a nightclub on July 29th of 1999. This man was described as being in his late teens or early 20s, and was slim with spiky hair, wore reading glasses on his head, and spoke with a, quote, posh accent. He and Raonaid had hit it off in the club and went to a fast food restaurant afterwards. According to one report, he was witnessed hassling her there. Later that same night, Raonaid turned up at the house of a friend, seemingly agitated. She told her friend that someone was following her, and she wouldn't leave until her taxi had arrived to collect her. However, the teenager never elaborated on the situation, and never spoke of it again. It is unknown if the person following her was the man she was seen dancing with, and it's also unclear if the man she was dancing with is the same one seen with her at the time of her murder. Other suspects in the case include a butcher with a history of violence against women, who reportedly bragged about the slaying of Raonaid while drunk, a hotel worker who had previously been accused of falsely imprisoning one woman and assaulting another, and a, quote, druggy-type man who was part of a group who held parties in a basement flat near to where Raonaid was attacked. He was said to have been obsessed with her. Also worth noting is that the hotel worker claimed he didn't know the teenager, but her friends stated otherwise. 2 other men who reportedly knew Raonaid and had histories of violence against women were also investigated. Yet another person of interest was a cook who was discovered with a collection of violent pornography and numerous martial arts weapons, including 2 samurai swords. He was taken in for an interview, but was released when it was found he had a solid alibi for the night in question. Another suspect in the case was Farah Noor, a Kenyan immigrant who was killed and dismembered in March of 2005 by Linda and Charlotte Mulhall, who were later gruesomely dubbed the Scissor Sisters. Linda and Charlotte were 2 sisters from Dublin and Noor had been dating their mother, Kathleen, at the time of his death. He had reportedly told Kathleen, quote, "I'm going to fucking kill you, just like I did with Raonaid." However, Noor was drunk at the time and was a known fantasist. He also had issues with drugs and alcohol. He was questioned during the original investigation, but was later ruled out. He told law enforcement that he had only said what he'd said to instill fear into Kathleen. The final suspect in the case is perhaps the most interesting. He was brought to the attention of law enforcement by a taxi driver who claimed he'd driven a young man with blood on his trousers to his home in the early hours of Saturday morning. The man initially asked to be taken to Granville Road at the top of Newton Park Avenue, but then changed his mind and reportedly gave incoherent instructions, taking the driver on a very long detour before eventually being dropped near his original requested location of Granville Road. The driver reported that the man seemed to linger at his house as if he was waiting for him to leave. A house-to-house search carried out at the time turned up no new leads. Nobody matching the description of the young man was known to live on the street. However, later on in the investigation, this man was identified. He apparently lived on another side of Newton Park Avenue. The taxi driver helped to ID him by picking him out of a photo lineup. When he was located, the man was found carrying a knife. He was a heroin user with a violent temper who had previously been charged with the sexual assault of another teen girl. The man was reportedly known to Raonaid and her friends and had a flimsy alibi. He was arrested and questioned in connection with the case, but ultimately no concrete evidence was ever found to link him to Raonaid's death. Later, when he was jailed for an unrelated crime, his cellmate came forward and claimed he'd admitted to killing the 17-year-old because she'd rejected his sexual advances. However, the man denied these claims, and no proof of his confession was ever found. Perhaps most interestingly of all is that on the 5th anniversary of Raonaid's death, her family was sent an anonymous letter. The writer gave the family their condolences and said that they knew the killer, who was questioned early on and dismissed as a person of interest. Authorities managed to track down the writer and, unsurprisingly, it turned out to be the man from the taxi. He claimed that he wrote the note to remove suspicion from himself. Despite his bizarre story and actions, investigators still didn't have enough evidence to confidently charge him with the murder. In August of 2009, Raonaid's parents set up a website as both a tribute to their daughter and to generate awareness of her case. Within 3 days, it had garnered 43 pages of messages. While many were positive, a large number were abusive, upsetting, and distressing. Law enforcement said they would look into it, but it is unknown what became of their investigation into who was leaving these horrific messages. Similarly, reportedly in the years following her death, Raonaid's grave was repeatedly vandalized. The culprit has never been identified. Raonaid was buried on September 7th, 1999. Her funeral was attended by dozens of friends, family members, and classmates. Her father, Jim, spoke at the event, stating, "Our beautiful child died on the pavement, with no loving, caring person there to help or comfort her. To her killer, we say, come out of the shadows and own up to what you have done. Do the right thing and confess your crime." To this day, Raonaid's case remains unsolved. Authorities have no prime suspect at this time. If you have any information about Raonaid's murder, you can contact the Garda Confidential line at 1-800-666-111. And there you have the facts. Please leave a comment down below with your own thoughts and speculations, and remember to like this video and subscribe to support the channel. Thank you for watching. Stay alert, stay safe, and I'll see you next time.